Hey guys, tonight we're waking up hungry. Again, your back aches before your eyes even open. You've been dreaming of bread, real bread. A thick crust that cracks open to a soft, pillowy middle. Maybe there's butter. Maybe you even taste honey. But the dream shatters the second you blink and realize that your blanket is just a rough burlap sack. Your bed is straw and your breath is fogging in the frozen air. Welcome to your morning. You're a medieval baker during one of the worst famines your village has ever known. You haven't had a full belly since last spring, and unless a miracle rolls in with the morning fog, the dough you're about to mix is mostly desperation and filler. Again, you sit up slowly, every muscle stiff. The hearth has gone out, and you didn't have enough wood to keep it lit overnight. The stones beneath your feet bite with cold as you stand, shaky and sore. Somewhere beneath your bakery, the coals are dead, or sleeping, like you wish you still were not. You scratch at your jaw, your beard's gritty with flour from yesterday. Or was it the day before? Times turned to porridge, lately blurry, thin, and always slightly sour. You sniff the air, ash, smoke, burnt rye crust. There's something else, too faint, but familiar. The pungent edge of spoiled grain. Probably your starter. She's moody, and by moody, we mean potentially lethal. Still, you get up, because if you don't bake, you don't eat. If you don't eat, you don't survive. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this anyway, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Hey, love seeing who's listening from across time zones and centuries. Turn off the lights, grab a cozy blanket, and get ready, 'cause our journey tonight is about to begin. You wrap your apron around your waist, crusted stiff with flour, dough, and soot. It hasn't been properly washed in weeks. Soap's a luxury now. Water's for mixing, not scrubbing. And besides, there's something kind of comforting about the smell. It smells like work, like survival. Your first steps take you to the flour chest. You lift the lid and stare at the powdery remains. It's not much. Pathetic scoop of barley flour, a little rye, and what might generously be called wheat, though it's mostly husks and dust. You run your hand through it, and it scratches your skin like ground up twigs. You sigh, time to get creative. You reach for the extras, the famine fillers, dried acorns, a bit of mashed root you hope is edible, some ground up straw. Yes, straw. Technically fibrous, technically food, technically not lethal in small doses. Probably you mix it all together, hoping the texture isn't too gritty, that the villagers won't notice the bitterness until after they've eaten. You can't afford complaints right now. The guild's watching, manners watching, everyone's watching. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers were victims of famine or collaborators in scarcity. All you know is that no matter how bad the harvest is, someone always thinks you're hiding bread. You knead the dough. It's heavier than usual, sticky in a way that screams, "This will burn." Your arms ache by the third push. Your back gives a twinge by the fifth. But you keep going. That's what bakers do. They keep going through plague, drought, blight, and now famine. Kneading like their lives depend on it, 'cause they do outside. The town is still sleeping, well pretending to. Its hunger has turned rest into restlessness. People lie awake counting rats in the rafters or listen to their neighbors cough through the walls. You hear something shuffle past your bakery window. Slow, paused, listening. Probably someone hoping to catch the scent of fresh bread, or checking if your back door's unlocked. You locked it. This time, your oven is cold, massive, a stone beast that dominates the rear of your home. You light the kindling with flint and fingers that shake more than they should. The fire catches. Slowly, you blow gently. You whisper to it. Some say it helps the flame. Others say it just calms you. There's an old baker's rhyme you mutter under your breath. Flour to feed, fire to rise, keep the heat, or hope it dies. Not Shakespeare, but it does the trick. You check the dough. It's trying to rise, bless its heart. You cover it and move to prep the baking boards. The wood is scorched and splintered. You flip them over to hide the worst of yesterday's blackened crust, and then you wait. The worst part of every famine morning isn't the hunger, it's the waiting. Waiting for the dough, for the fire, for the knock at the door. 'Cause there's always a knock. Sometimes it's a neighbor asking for credit you can't afford to give. Sometimes it's the steward demanding the Lord's loves your best batch, carted away without thanks. And sometimes it's no one at all. It's just the silence and your heartbeat and the knowledge that people outside are starving, and they think you're the one with the key to survival. You glance at your youngest, still asleep in the corner, clutching a lump of stale crust like a toy. She doesn't stir, even when the fire pops. Good. Let her dream a little longer. Let her think bread is easy, warm, endless. You rub your eyes, streaking them with flour. Another day begins, and it's already too long. And as the sky outside shifts from black to gray, the smell of smoke and flour fills your lungs. You stretch your fingers cramped from the cold and whisper a half prayer to the patron saint of bakers. Not that she's been especially helpful lately, but hey, can't hurt you. Glance at the door again. It's going to knock. It always does. You hear it before you see it. A shuffle, then a fist. 3 knocks. Firm, fast, and too early. You know that knock. You open the door, just enough to see the steward's wool sleeve and the glint of that little bronze badge pinned to his chest. Badge that means your best loaves aren't yours. They belong to the manor, and the manor is never late to collect. He doesn't greet you, nods at the baskets near the hearth and says, "We'll be back by mid-morning." He doesn't ask if you've even begun baking yet. He doesn't care. If there's no bread ready when he returns, he'll take whatever you've got, warm or not, and report you. And you really don't want to be reported during the famine. You close the door with a soft thud. The fire spits in the oven, catching. Slowly, your dough isn't ready. You're behind. Again, the manor's quotas don't care that the grain came in late, or that rats ate half your stores, or that your middle child is sick with something you can't name and can't treat. You owe bread every day. A fixed number of loaves for the steward to carry off on his smug little cart, enough to feed the noble household and their guards. Never mind that they're eating in gold-trimmed rooms while your neighbor just boiled shoe leather for dinner. You kneel near the fire and blow gently on the embers. Your fingers are raw from yesterday's burns, still blistered. The burns come from rushing pulling bread too fast, pushing it in too hot. There's no time to heal. Just keep baking. You try not to let your thoughts spiral, but they do anyway. You think of the punishment for under-delivery, fines, public shaming, stocks, if you're lucky, confiscation of what little grain you have left. If you're not, the village saw what happened to old Marna last month. Her oven dismantled brick by brick. As an example, she was left with nothing but a ladle and an empty room that once smelt like heaven. You're not about to become the next Marna. You knead harder. The dough's rising barely. You sprinkle it with a touch of salt. Not much. Salt's expensive. Now, almost precious. You traded 2 good ladlefuls of porridge for the last pouch. Still, a pinch makes the difference between something edible and something bitter enough to spit out. You set the loaves on the boards. 4 small rounds. That's it. That's all you can afford to give away today. You have to stretch the rest for your own family, for the neighbors who offer favors or trade onions or candle stubs, or even just a whispered thank you. And that thank you might be the only good thing you hear all day. You slide the boards into the oven. The heat slaps your face as the crusts begin to form. If you listen to the sizzle of moisture evaporating, it's one of the few sounds in this world that still brings you comfort. That tiny, golden cracklet tells you the bread is still alive. That you're still alive. The door creaks again. This time, it's not the steward. It's a neighbor. Amy. She's young, but already stooped from work. Her shawl is thin, her cheeks hollow. She clutches a basket with nothing in it but a single cracked egg. Trade. She asks softly. You glance at the loaves, none to spare yet. You look at the egg. Fragile, risky, could be rotten, could be gold. You nod once and take it. She doesn't wait for the loaf. She trusts you'll remember, and you will. Do historians still argue whether famine economies made communities stronger or tore them apart? But you've seen both sides. You've seen neighbors share crusts and secrets, and you've seen them steal from each other's windows. When the night is quiet enough, you know that kindness gets thinner as hunger gets louder. You pull the first loaves. It's just as the steward returns. He doesn't speak, just loads the basket, counts them out loud, and gives a single grunt. Not enough to arrest you, not enough to praise you, stuff to remind you who owns your mornings. He leaves. The smell of bread stays. You exhale for the first time in an hour. Then your eldest stirs from the corner, rubbing his eyes. Is there any for us? You hesitate. Not because you don't want to give him some, but because the numbers don't lie. 4 loaves to the manor, 2 more cooling on the stone. That's 6. Your 7 mouths in this house. You break the smallest one in half and hand it to him. Eat slowly, you say. He nods, solemn, like only a child who knows real hunger can be. He takes small bites, cradling the piece like it's a relic. You tear a corner for yourself. It's gritty, harsh. You chew slowly. There's a crunch, probably bark, or a pebble, or hope, fossilized into something sharp. In the distance, church bells ring. Not a feast day, just the reminder of morning prayers. Cue for the village too. Rise, shuffle, pray, survive. You don't bother going today. You pray with your hands in dough and your face near flame. That's enough. You clean your hands with ash from the fire. No soap, no cloth, just a quick rub, a ghost of cleanliness. Back to work, because today isn't finished. You'll bake again by dusk with whatever scraps you can gather. And between now and then, you'll deliver crusts to a widow whose son died last week. You'll mend a split barrel with pitch someone left at your door. You'll boil the egg, hopefully fresh, and give half to your sick daughter, 'cause she hasn't smiled in 2 days, and you're starting to wonder if she ever will again. You'll turn the ashes from your oven into lye to trade with the tanner's wife. You'll walk by the grain hall and glance at the soldiers standing guard. You'll wonder how much flour they're sitting on behind those locked doors. You'll hear your stomach growl and try to ignore it. You'll remember when bread smelled sweet, when it wasn't dangerous to have extra, when baking was joy, not judgment. But those days are gone. For now, bread is not a gift. It is a currency, a weapon, a prayer. And you are its tired, singed, unpaid priest. You don't hear the guild inspector coming. It's the worst part. No knock, no warning. It's the heavy sound of leather boots on packed dirt outside your door. And then the iron latch squealing open like it hasn't been oiled since the last crusade. He steps inside, ducking slightly to clear the low beam, then straightens with a sniff. Always the sniff. You swear these men are trained to detect spoiled grain from 3 villages away. He's in full guild garble coat, marked with the crest of the Baker's Guild, a faded parchment scroll tucked under one arm, and the universal weapon of all self-important middlemen, a clipboard or its medieval cousin, a wax tablet with a smug little stylus. You nod. Master Aldrich. He doesn't nod back. He just says, "You were seen selling yesterday's loaves after dusk." You blink. "They were still warm." "I didn't say they were cold," he replies, raising a brow like he's just caught you whispering heresy into a sack of barley. You feel your stomach twist not from hunger this time, eh? But from that special dread that only a guild audit can summon. Because when the famine hits, the rules don't loosen. They tighten. In theory, the Baker's Guild protects your craft. They're supposed to keep prices fair, prevent undercutting, ensure quality, and make sure no one's mixing sawdust into their sourdoughh. In practice, they're the reason you lost half a week's earnings last month over a single burnt heel. Master Aldrich walks slowly around your workspace, inspecting the boards, peering into your flour bin, tapping loaves like a suspicious customer at a market stall. He cuts one open with a small blade, probably sharper than anything in your kitchen, and examines the crumb. This is coarse, he says. You want to laugh? Of course, it's coarse. It's famine bread. It's barely bread. It's held together by desperation, spit, and the stubborn memory of better harvests. It's the grain, you say. What's left of it? He squints. Any chalk? No. Sawdust? No. He nods once, then scratches a quick mark on his tablet. You're safe. This time, historians still argue whether guild regulation helped keep bakers honest, or simply created a caste of professional scolders with too much free time and not enough bread to share. You lean toward the second theory, because while you're spending half your waking life scraping together something bakeable, the guild's busy inspecting, taxing, and reminding you that failure isn't just personal, it's illegal. You remember when a boy 16 tried to start his own stall 2 winters ago, made decent loaves from chestnut flour and dried apples. The guild shut him down within a week. No license, no dues paid. He was banned from baking in town, had to become a rat catcher instead. You still think about his hands burned from muffins, then torn up by traps? Master Aldrich finishes his round and leaves without another word. No, fine today. Stress, heartburn, and a loaf with a deep, judgmental slash across its crust. You stare at it. You were going to trade that one. Sighing, you toss it aside, knowing you'll probably end up eating it yourself. Inspector touched bread. It's like bad luck, no one wants it. You sit down on your stool and rub your hands together. They're cracked from the cold and the flour. One knuckle is bleeding again. You don't notice until you see the pink smear on your apron. You think about washing it. You done as dead. You reach for a stale hunk of yesterday's crust. Dip it into some boiled water with a wilted herb and chew slowly. It tastes like regret with a hint of rosemary. Through the tiny window above your hearth, you see the guild banner fluttering in the wind, red and gold, with a loaf and a torch crossed beneath a crown. Regal, proud, completely disconnected from the actual state of bread. The guild doesn't care how you get the flour, whether you trade your boots or your dignity or 2 fingers in a threshing accident, as long as you pay dues, as long as you don't make them look bad, as long as you smile and say yes, Master Aldrich, while he fingers your dough like it owes him rent. Your neighbor Tomlin once tried to sell cracked oat rolls after dark, claimed they were personal consumption. The guild fined him so hard he had to pawn his last of pewter mugs. Now he drinks ale out of a bowl. The irony. Half the bread on the manor table probably came from the same batch that got Tomlin punished. You spit a breadcrumb from your tongue and mutter, "Guild can choke on it." Your youngest hears you from the back room and giggles. Choke on what? You smile, despite yourself. Bad bread. She grins, 2 teeth missing. We never make bad bread. You pause. Well, she's not wrong. You make the best you can. And some days, that's a miracle all its own. You glance back at the slash loaf and feel a small surge of rebellion. You heat it up, cut it into thin slices, add a smear of garlic fat saved from 3 dinners ago. Toast it till it hisses. The crust softens just enough to be chewable, almost pleasant. You feed a piece to your daughter. She closes her eyes like it's a feast, and suddenly the guild, the steward, the quotas, they all fall quiet for a minute until the scratching at the door begins. You freeze. Not a knock, a scratch, deliberate, slow. You open it to find a gaunt man in traveling leathers, thin face, missing an ear, a pilgrim's badge on his shoulder. He holds out a coin, a real one, silver. He doesn't speak, points at your oven. You glance back. Okay, only 2 loaves left, and one of them is for tonight. You look at your daughter, licking garlic from her fingers. You take the coin, you hand him the loaf, and as he walks away, you wonder, what did he see in your face that told him you'd give? Or maybe, more honestly, he didn't care. Pilgrims are like that. Hungry ghosts on muddy roads, carrying sacred promises in pockets full of diseases. Some say giving bread to a pilgrim buys you a blessing. Others say it just leaves you 1 loaf closer to starvation. The fire is never out for long. You lie down for what feels like a moment, just enough to rest your back. Maybe let the ache in your legs settle into something numb, but the fire needs feeding. Always, even in sleep, your ears are tuned to the rhythms of it. That faint pop of burning wood. That sudden silence when embers cool too fast. Wake before the chill creeps fully across the floor. Your hands fumble in the dark. You find the stick, stir the coals, and feel the dry heat flare against your face. The inside of the stone oven glows again, amber and angry. You're grateful, in a way. Heat means life. Cold means breadless mornings. But heat hurts. You wince as you press your palms against the smooth side of the oven wall, judging temperature the old way by touch and instinct. No thermometers here, just scars. The backs of your hands are a patchwork of shiny red and pale white, where skin gave up long ago. You know the oven's mood better than you know your own stone. Ovens are noble things, heavy, hungry, hard to build, and harder to fix. Yours is cracked on the left side, warped slightly after a frost to winter's back, but it still holds heat well enough. It was your father's before you, and probably his father's before that, or someone else's, honestly. Back when bakers passed down more than blisters, there's an art to keeping it going. Too hot, and the crusts blacken into bitter armor. And the centers stay gummy. Worst of all, uneven heat. You've ruined entire trays that weigh half raw, half incinerated, all useless. You learn to rotate by feel, by instinct, by watching the shadow a loaf casts as it starts to rise. You crouch low to shove a log deeper into the fire. Your shoulder brushes the outer rim of the oven. A sharp sting, another burn. You hiss quietly, not out of pain, just frustration. You've done this so many times, your body doesn't even flinch anymore. But it should. You wrap the burn in a corner of your tunic and press the cloth tight. Just another mark, another layer. You're starting to look like a bread gulum, patches of hardened skin and flour dust, stitched together with sleepless hours and heat. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers suffered more injuries than other laborers, or if theirs were just more ... invisible. Not like the blacksmith's crushed thumb or the miller's missing finger. Bakers didn't lose limbs, they just lost sleep and skin, and sometimes their minds, because bread doesn't care if it's midnight or market day, or if you buried your mother yesterday. Bread rises when it rises. You have to be there when it does. You stretch your back and walk to the basin in the corner. The water is cold, always. You splash some on your face. It wakes you just enough to keep going. You blink slowly, staring at your reflection in the surface. The lines around your eyes, the flour in your hair, the expression of someone who forgot what mornings used to feel like. It's still dark outside. You can't see stars through the soot on the window, but you know they're there, distant, indifferent. You light the oil lamp and check the dough. It's puffed up, finally, warmed by the fire, alive with that quiet magic that still amazes you. Yeast is a strange little beast, visible, temperamental, and absolutely necessary. This batch looks good, smells a little sour, but not in a bad way. That tangy note that says, yes, I'm ready to become bread. You punch it down, fold, knead, again. Rhythm matters now. This is the part that feels like baking. It's almost meditative. Your body remembers what your mind is too tired to track. Push, fold, turn, dust with flour. The dough squeaks faintly under your palms, like it's protesting the early hour. You whisper, you're not the only one. You shape it into round 6 today, maybe 7 if you're lucky. You leave one lump in the bowl to rise longer. Maybe that'll be for lunch, if no one unexpected shows up. If no child begs at your door. If no rats steal it first. Rats, oof. You glance toward the corner where you set traps yesterday. One is tripped, empty. They're getting smarter, or maybe just hungrier. You grab a flat stone and thump it down near the wall just to make a point. The scrabbling pauses, then continues. you'll have to get the cat back. If you traded it last month for a sack of rye that turned out to be mostly husk. Worst deal you've ever made. The kids still talk about her like she died in battle. The loaves are ready for the oven now. You slide them in, carefully. The heat whooshes out as the door opens, kissing your face with a wave of fire. You place each loaf like it's sacred. In a way, it is. Bread is the closest thing most peasants would get to a miracle. A warm loaf, crusty and golden, pulled from the flames, says hope you can chew. You sit again, this time close to the fire, close enough to feel your eyelids grow heavy just for a minute. You tell yourself, you lean your head back, you dream immediately. In the dream, you're baking. But everything goes right. The dough rises perfectly. The oven glows warm but gentle. No burns, no knocks at the door of quotas, or guilds, or debts. You take a loaf and break it open. Steam curls out, soft and yeasty, and you eat the whole thing. Yourself. You wake up coughing on smoke. The oven's too hot again. You rush to pull the loaves. The bottoms are singed, but salvageable. You curse under your breath, not loud enough to wake the children. You slap your cheeks twice. Adela teacher. Sleep is a thief, and it almost stole today's rations. One of the loaves split on top uneven, useless for trade, but still edible. You break it open. It's dense, tough, but it smells right. You tear off a piece and eat while standing jaw, working like a mule's. It fills your belly just enough to remind you it's empty. The sun is rising. You rub your eyes with the sleeve of your tunic and stand another day, another fire, another round of baking ahead. Because even when the world is crumbling, the oven still needs feeding. The flour runs out before the hunger does. You stare at the bottom of the sack, watching the last handful of dusty, off-white powder cling to the coarse weave. You tilt it, shake it, tap the corners, hoping maybe some miracle granule was hiding in a fold. Nothing. You already scraped the insides with a wooden spoon last night, and now it's just air and ghosts. Well, not entirely nothing. There's the usual dusting of bugs, little black beetles. If you pick one out, then two more. A third falls apart and your fingers more legs than anything else. You sigh. You'll sift it. Again, of course. Sifting is a generous word for what you're about to do. You have a bit of coarse cloth stretched across a frame that once belonged to your grandmother's window. It's torn in one corner. Still does the trick. You hold it over a bowl and shake what's left of the flour through, watching the insects and grit collect on the top like unwelcome guests at a feast. You've done this so many times now. It doesn't even register as gross. It's just ... standard. Another chore, like brushing soot off the oven bricks or plucking rat hairs out of the water bucket. And here's the truth. No one at market likes to say out loud, everyone's bread is fake now. Real grain, the pure stuff. You'd have to beg a noble, rob a priest, or marry a miller, and even then, good luck. The famine means no surplus, no stocks, and nothing but slim pickings for peasants. So you do what everyone does when the good flour runs out. You stretch it with whatever you can. A little ground acorn, maybe mashed lentils. You've tried turnip peel before, full texture, weird smell, but it sort of works if you mix in enough ashdot. Yes, ashdot wood, ash, sifted fine, gives the dough just enough structure to bake. Not flavor god, no, but firmness. Too. You don't even have to burn good firewood, just to sweep it out of the hearth and pretend it's exotic spice. Historians still argue whether these additives, shortened lifespans or merely made daily life feel longer. What's clear is that you had to become a kind of magician, part cook, part chemist, part scavenger, And when the real ingredients vanish, you look around and start wondering what else might rise in a bowl. Barley husks, pods, grated bark. Once, during a desperate week, you crushed up chalk. Not much, just enough to bulk up the flour. Your sister said it made the bread crunchy. She meant it as a compliment. Then there's sawdust. You swore you'd never go there, But people. Talk the carpenter down the road, shaves soft wood, keeps it clean. You've seen folks trade eggs for a scoop of it. Mix a little in with the rest, and it's not terrible. Don't chew too long. You never thought baking would require so much compromise. You run your fingers through the mix in your bowl, half wheat, half filler. You sniff, still smells faintly sweet. That's a good sign. You add water slowly, mixing by hand. The dough resists, at first clumpy, uneven, but eventually yields. You knead it gently. There's less give than usual, and the texture's all wrong. But you'll bake it anyway, because you have to. It's not like anyone's going to spit it out. Not these days. Bread's bread, even if it's mostly tree. You think about that poor soul who tried using dried nettle once. It puffed up, beautifully looked like real bread, till people started scratching at their throats, wheezing, eyes swelling shut. He vanished the next day. No one knows where he went. Some say the guild exiled him. Others say he ate his own loaf. Either way, he stuck to safer fillers after that. Still, you can't help but look at the forest differently now. A patch of moss. Could it be dried? Maybe. That vine with the white berries, what exactly happens? If you boil it first, it's a dangerous game, this, but you're already playing. You glance at your younger daughter, curled in the corner with her rag doll. You haven't told her that today's bread will be mostly acorn and bark. She probably wouldn't care. Kids don't notice unless it's bitter enough to make them gag. And honestly, if it fills her belly, she'll eat it like a feast. You set the loaves to rise in the warmest spot near the oven. Lumpy, sad. You shape them into rounds. Anyway, tucking in the cracked edges with tired fingers. You remember a time when bread was beautiful soft, golden, puffed high with real flour and real yeast. You remember your mother brushing the tops with milk before baking, sometimes even adding a bit of honey crust if there was a good harvest. A kind of bread is a memory now, a fairy tale. You haven't brushed a loaf with anything but hope in over a year. The loaves are ready for the oven. You slide them in, careful not to bump the cracked hearthstone. The smell that comes back isn't bad, actually. Earthy, a little smoky. Corn whiff of scorched acorn at the edges, but not enough to scare anyone. You lean against the table and wait, listening. You swear you can hear the filler and the loaves protesting, like the barks saying, "I wasn't meant to be here, you know?" Double quotes. Well, neither were you. Not in this famine. Not baking fake bread while the steward's wife dines on imported raisins. You poke one loaf with a stick. It resists. A good sign. Sort of. At least it didn't crumble. When you finally pull them out, you line them up on a cloth and blow across the tops. Steam rises. The crust is pale, rough, but it smells enough like food to pass. You break one open. The inside is darker than usual. The texture is odd. Kind of. Fibrous, but soft enough to chew. You take a bite. It's not bread. Not really. But it'll do. You give a piece to each of the kids. They don't ask what's in it. And you don't tell them. Because they can eat it with a smile. Even a crooked one. Then maybe, for just a night, it's real bread, after all. You lift the cloth covering the bowl and immediately flinch. Not from movement. Jeez, isn't that dramatic? But from the smell, it hits your nose with that unmistakable mix of sour, wet socks, and fruit that's been left too long on a church altar. You tilt the bowl slightly, staring into the sponge of half-risen dough. It's bubbling, kind of, or maybe fermenting, or maybe just rotting. Hard to tell these days. There's no exact science here. Your yeast lives and dies on vibes. Modern. People don't know this, but you don't just have yeast in your pantry. There are no tidy little packets, no precise measuring spoons, no instant rise. What you've got is a living, moody swamp creature you keep trapped in a bowl. And if you don't feed it, right or worse, if you forget it for a day turns on you. Your starter is temperamental. It's older than your youngest child, probably. Someone gave you the original lump years ago. You've been feeding it, splitting it, reviving it, and cursing it ever since. You've cried over it, You've prayed over it. You've shouted at it in the dark, and it still acts like you're the problem today. It smells off. It's too much temps, not enough yeastiness. The bubbles are wrong. Too wide, too slow. The texture, slippery. Never a good sign. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers truly understood fermentation, or if they just rode the line between miracle and mold with blind faith and practiced desperation. You lean toward the second explanation, because that's what you're doing now. You grab a spoon and poke it. It deflates slightly, like a sad balloon. Not good, but not disqualified. You give it a bit more flour and water, whisper a half-hearted apology, and hope it rallies. That's how it works. Sometimes it just needs encouragement, or food, or divine intervention. You remember last winter when your starter died outright? Froze solid. You held it in your hands for an hour, begging it to revive, hoping that warmth and guilt might coax it back. It didn't. You buried it in the hearth ash like a fallen soldier, then started again with a scrap of old tow and a handful of flour. That one came back meaner, but it worked. You check today's dough again. It's sticky. You try kneading, but it clings like betrayal. You add a bit more flour. It turns stiff. You add water. It becomes glue. This is the dance. Too dry, too wet, too much starter. Not enough. You look at it sideways, and it collapses out of spite. Some bakers say a good dough should feel like your earlobe, springy, but soft. Others say it should feel like a baby's belly. Others don't say anything at all. They just grunt and poke and somehow always get it right. You're not one of those. You live on the edge of disaster. You try again. Fold, turn, stretch, wait. Still not right. You glance at the small jar in the corner, the one with the special starter you made 2 weeks ago when things got really weird. That one smells like wine and regret. You think there's something growing on the top, fuzzy, white. It might be penicillin, might be doom. You scrape off the top and add a spoonful anyway. Sometimes, so weird batches work best. You remember one loaf you made that rose so high, your neighbor accused you of witchcraft. You had to let her daughter take half the loaf, just to stop the rumors. The next week, same recipe, total flop. Flat as a wheel and twice as heavy. Yeast is fickle. People don't understand how magical it really is. You do. You've seen it save lives and ruin them back in the last famine. The Lord Steward banned all sour loaves, claimed they were unholy. People baked them anyway. Secretly, you did too. That's when you learned to cover your rising dough with dried herbs to mask the scent, or bury it in the root cellar, wrapped in damp cloth like contraband. Fermenting dough smells like survival, even if it sometimes makes you gag. The batch you're working on now seems calmer. The new addition helped. A few bubbles, the right kind. It starts to stretch without tearing. Still ugly, but that's never stopped you before. You divide it into portions and line them up on the board. There are uneven ones, smaller, ones lopsided, ones already forming a crust where the wind kissed it too long. You pinch it smooth and cover them all again, and wait. Bakers spend most of their lives waiting for dough, for heat, for rise, for collapse, for delivery boys, for debt collectors. Sometimes you think your whole life is just one big, flour-dusted pause. You walk to the window and peek out. It's raining. Of course it is. Moist air slows everything down. Yeast hates drama, and the air today is practically weeping. You turn back, check the lows. One is rising too fast. It's overcompensating. You punch it down gently, murmuring, "Not yet. Just hold on." The room smells strange now. A mix of rising, dough, ash, and something else. Damp wool. The sour bite of wet flour. Not bad. Not good. Just ... Bread life. You catch a whiff of the weird starter again and wonder briefly if you've poisoned everyone. You hope not, but you keep baking because dough disasters are just part of the job. Every loaf is a gamble, a prayer, a sweaty palm to negotiation with unseen microbes. Sometimes it comes out soft, warm and golden. Other times it comes out like a medieval brick. You slice the test loaf you made earlier. It's dense, spongy, edible. You chew slowly. There's a faint hint of ... grape. You blinked. That might have been from the mold jar. You shrugged. You've eaten worse. You glance at your kids, again still napping on the floor. You break the slice in two and leave it near them. Okay? They'll wake soon, hungry. You don't have the luxury of giving up, even if the day's dough collapses. Hey, even if the yeast dies, even if the loaves come out blackened, dense, or bitter. Because bread isn't just food anymore. It's your whole existence. And if the starter turns against you again tomorrow, you'll still feed it. Because that's what bakers do. We knead, and fold, and hope. You drag your tired feet toward the oven. The air around you is thick with the smell of smoke and a faint sourness that lingers like a stubborn memory. This oven isn't the fancy stone dome you dream about, the kind that bakes golden crusts and leaves villagers craving your bread. No, this one is a crooked brick box patched together with mud and old tiles. Its blackened mouth yawning wide enough to swallow your loaves whole. You shove the last of the wood inside, careful not to slam the door. The fire catches with a hiss and a crackle, sending a few sparks up the chimney. You wipe your hands on your apron and stare at the oven's belly, wondering if it's hot enough. The truth is, you can never be sure. You learned that the hard way. Last winter, you baked a batch so cold, it came out soggy, smelling like wet cardboard and disappointment. The kids refused to eat it. The neighbors whispered that your skill was failing. The steward grumbled that the taxes would have to rise again because the common folk can't even bake a decent loaf anymore. It stings. Baking is an art, a science, and a gamble. Your oven is an unruly beast, temperamental and slow to warm, shaped by years of patching and guesswork. You learn to judge its heat by the color of the embers, the feel of the bricks, the stubborn crackle that sometimes means ready and other times means don't bother. Your hands hover near the oven's opening, feeling the heat radiate out in waves. It's uneven hotter near the back, cooler near the door. You adjust your loaves, shifting them carefully to catch the best spot, hoping the fire will cooperate. There are no thermometers, no timers, just intuition, years of trial and error, and a pinch of luck as you slide the loaves inside. You think about the history of bread ovens. In medieval times, communal ovens were common village ovens where everyone brought their dough, paid their fees, and waited for their turn. You remember your father talking about how the oven master held more power than the local lord sometimes, deciding who ate and who waited. You're lucky to have your own oven, even if it's barely holding together. You close the door and place a handful of ashes on top to keep the heat in. Then you wait. Baking bread is an exercise in patience. The next hour stretches long and quiet. You sit by the fire, turning over memories like old dough, thinking about the days before famine, when the wheat was plentiful, when your hands never had to wrestle with this kind of desperation. Now, the heat is too low. The loaves bake slowly, turning a pale, uneven brown. You prod one with a stick. It feels soft and doughy, not ready. The smell changes as time pursues a sharp, yeasty temps mixed with the earthy scent of burnt wood and ash. It's familiar, comforting even, but you know, it also means survival. You lift the oven door and peek inside. One loaf has cracked along the side, its crust split open like a wound. You sigh. That loaf would be heavier than usual, dense and chewy in the worst way, but it'll feed someone. You remember reading somewhere that medieval ovens required a specific firing method. The fire had to be built inside the oven to heat the bricks, then swept out before baking. Some bakers used straw or dried grass to create a quick, intense blaze. Others relied on wood scraps or peat, but you're running out of options. The famine has made firewood scarce. You started using brush and fallen branches, which burn hotter but faster. Sometimes you mix in old charcoal or dried dung. You recall an old neighbor telling stories about the couch pyres and how they were the secret to baking bread in hard times. It's grim, but effective. You keep a small pile of dung nearby, wrapped in cloth to keep it dry. It smells awful, but it keeps your oven going. The loaves near the back are browning better now. You can almost hear the crust crackle as it sets. You gently tap one hollow. That's the sign. You pull the loaves out, placing them carefully on the counter to cool. The crusts are rough, uneven. Some parts are burnt, others undercooked. The smell is smoky and sour, a far cry from the sweet, nutty aroma you remember from better days. Still, bread is bread. You cut into one loaf. The crumb is dense and heavy, studded with bits of bark and husk you had to add to stretch the flour. The texture is chewy, almost rubbery in places. You think about how your ancestors might have handled this, how they endured worse winters, harsher famines, and yet managed to feed their families with what little they had. You remind yourself that the oven is only part of the battle. You could have perfect dough, perfect yeast, can still get a burnt loaf if the oven refuses to cooperate. You watch the children eat their slices, quietly, not complaining about the toughness or the odd taste. They are hungry enough to eat anything. It's the small victories that keep you going. You wipe sweat from your brow and start cleaning the oven's mouth. Ashes spill out, and you scoop them back inside, saving every bit of heat you can. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters. The night is coming fast. You stoke the fire again, adding a few more dry twigs, and sit back down. Tomorrow, you'll bake again. Maybe better, maybe worse, but the oven will be waiting, and so will you. Historians still argue whether the communal ovens or private ones like yours were better for maintaining food security during famines. Some say sharing meant risk of contamination. Others argue it was a vital support network. You're just glad to have this hot, smoky box to fight the cold with. You wake before dawn, the cold seeping under the cracks of your wooden shutters, pricking at your skin like tiny, icy needles. The sky outside is a dull slate gray, heavy with clouds that promise another wet day or worse, snow that will only freeze the ground harder. You pull your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders and trudge toward the mill, the weight of your responsibilities sinking deep into your bones. Today, like every day during these famine years, the task ahead feels like both your salvation and your curse. The mill is a humble, creaky building on the edge of the village, its walls sagging and wood splintering in places. You approach the large wooden wheel, worn smooth by years of labor, the moss growing on its edges, soft but stubborn. The mill wheel groans as it turns slowly in the stream, but today it feels sluggish, as if it's tired too. The water flow has been weak these past months, and without a strong current, the grinding slows to a crawl. You carry your small sack of grain inside, feeling the gritty weight in your arms. It's nothing like the sacks of golden wheat your father once brought home after harvests that seemed endless and generous. Now the grain is sparse, scattered with bits of chaff and husk, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, mixed with dirt or pebbles. You set the sack down carefully beside the grinding stone's large slabs of sandstone, darkened with age and use. You grip the wooden handle attached to the upper millstone, muscles tightening as you begin to turn. The stones scrape against each other, producing a harsh, grinding noise that fills the chilly air. It's a sound that you've come to associate with both hope and hardship. Hope that the grain will turn into usable flour, and hardship because the process is exhausting, slow, and never guarantees enough to coarse flour spills from between the stones. Dust rising in little clouds that settle on your hands and clothes. You scoop it up with a wooden bowl, noticing the imperfections, pieces of straw, fragments of cracked husks, and sometimes the grit of small stones that escaped the initial winnowing. This isn't the fine white flour that the wealthy bake into delicate breads. This is survival flour dense, gritty, and far from appetizing, but it will have to do. You pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow, even though the air is cold. The repetitive motion has warmed you, but your arms ache deeply, muscles trembling from the effort. Your hands are raw from years of work, calloused and cracked, but still steady enough to keep turning the wheel. Outside, the village is beginning to stir. Figures move quietly through the mist, faces drawn and tired. Children with hollow eyes clutch scraps of cloth, and women carry empty baskets. Hunger has carved itself into their features, and you can feel the weight of their expectations resting on your shoulders. You remember learning that during medieval times, mills were central to village life, often controlled by the lord or local monastery, who charged peasants fees for grinding grain. Watermills were prized for their efficiency, but were vulnerable to weather. Droughts could stop the water flow, and floods could destroy the entire mill. Hand mills were laborious and slow, but offered some independence. Historians still argue whether watermills actually helped villages survive famines or simply shifted the hardships around. Some say that when mills failed, the entire food supply chain collapsed. Others believe they offered a critical advantage when working properly. You push the handle again, grimacing as the wheel jerks unevenly. The stream feeding the mill has been unusually low this season, and without steady water, the grinding is frustratingly slow. Every grain you process is precious. You think about the wasted effort if the flour turns out unusable. A child tugs at your sleeve, a small, pale boy with sunken cheeks and a voice barely above a whisper. His eyes plead for a crumb, for just a taste of what you're grinding. Q. Kneel down, forcing a smile even as your heart clenches. You take a small scoop of the coarsest flour, mixing it with a little water until it forms a tough, lumpy dough. It's barely edible, but it will keep him going for another day. You hand the dough to him carefully. His face lights up, however briefly, and he clutches the food like a treasure. Grinding grain in famine years isn't just a physical trial. It's a daily reminder of what you've lost and what you must fight to keep. The millstone grinds relentlessly, as if mocking your desperation, but you keep turning, because if you stop, even for a moment, everything could crumble. You glance at the mill's walls, stained and cracked, and wonder how much longer this fragile structure will hold. You hope the rain doesn't come heavy today. A flood would wash away your hard work and perhaps your last chance at survival. The air inside is thick with dust and the sharp smell of earth and damp wood. Your breath comes out in small clouds as you work. The chill bites at your fingers, making the task harder, but you push on. You think about the strange mix of resilience and fragility that defines your life now. The mill is a symbol of both, a reminder that even as the world crumbles around you, you must keep grinding, keep fighting. The day grows older, but your work is far from done. You load the coarse flour into sacks, careful to protect it from the damp air that would spoil it quickly. Every precious grain counts. As you step outside, the wind picks up, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. The village lies quiet, waiting for the next cycle grind. Bake, eat, survive. You pause for a moment, looking out over the gray fields, the twisted trees, and the muddy roads. The famine has changed everything, but you are still here, still turning the millstone, still baking the bread, and somehow that counts for something. You trudge back to the bakery with your sacks of coarse, dusty flour, each step heavier than the last, as if the very air around you is thickening, pressing down on your chest. The sky hangs low and oppressive, the dull amber sun struggling feebly through thick, gray clouds that promise more rain or even snow. Your breath fogs in short, sharp bursts, and the chill seeps deep into your bones, making every movement sluggish. The weight of the day's labor and the burden of uncertainty settle heavily on your shoulders, reminding you that this is no ordinary debt, just another in a long series of relentless battles against hunger. The bakery smells faintly of stale smoke and old ash, with just a lingering hint of yesterday's burnt crust clinging stubbornly to the wooden beams and stone floor. The oven stands cold, its blackened mouth a silent witness to countless bakes past, now still and unyielding. You'll glance at it and feel a pang of frustration. The oven doesn't care about your hunger or the ache in your belly. doesn't care about your family, waiting anxiously outside with empty hands and hopeful eyes. The oven simply waits, indifferent as the famine that gnaws away at your village. You begin the familiar ritual, dumping the coarse, gritty flour into a worn wooden bowl. It feels heavier than usual, like carrying the weight of desperation itself. You mix it slowly with what little water you've saved, precious drops you've hoarded like treasure, watching the powdery flour absorb the liquid grudgingly. The dough feels stubborn, dry, and uneven, sticking to your fingers in clumps. It's a far cry from the elastic, airy dough you once dreamt of, back before the famine changed everything. Your hands move methodically, kneading the dough with care, despite the chill in your stiff, aching fingers. Each fold and press is a test of endurance and willpower. You add in strange fillers, ground bark, crushed acorns, and bits of roots that you've scavenged from the forest or bartered with neighbors. Visit bitter additions, poke out the flour, and make the dough stretch further. But they also make the bread taste harsh, gritty, almost inedible to anyone who remembers better days. Still, desperate times call for desperate measures, okay? And hunger dulls the palate faster than any seasoning can mask. You work the dough until it grudgingly comes together. It's lumpy and coarse, but workable enough to shape. Your muscles burn with the effort, sweat prickling your skin despite the cold. You think back to how baking was once a respected craft, bakers held in high regard, their loaves sought after in bustling marketplaces. But now, baking is a grim daily chore, a survival tactic rather than an art. You form rough, uneven loaves and place them on a wooden board by the window, where a weak, K light barely filters through the grime-covered glass. The dough rises, slowly if at all. Your yeast, borrowed from a kindly neighbor who swears it's the last good batch left in the village, is sluggish. The bubbles form irregularly, the texture uneven, as if the dough itself is too tired to rise properly. You wonder how much of your bread's softness depends on luck versus skill, especially when everything seems against you. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers truly understood yeast's role in fermentation, or if they treated it as magical lore, even cursed, depending on the results. To you, it feels more like a cruel mystery, one more thing beyond your control in a life packed full of uncertainties. You turn your attention to the oven, stoking the fire carefully with precious dry wood and scraps scavenged from broken furniture and old pallets. The flames crackle and dance, throwing flickering shadows against the soot-blackened walls. You battle the cold with every flicker of flame, coaxing the oven to heat evenly. It's a delicate balance. It's too hot, and the loaves will burn before baking through. Too cold, and the dough will remain dense and doughy, sliding the loaves inside. You close the oven door and shove ashes against the opening to trap the heat. Then begins the longest, most nerve-wracking part, the wait. You pace the small bakery, listening intently to the sounds of the fire and the soft popping of moisture escaping from the baking bread. Time stretches slow and taut, each minute feeling like an eternity. The smell that eventually drifts out is smoky and sour, a strange comfort amid the bleakness. You pull the loaves out one by one, their crusts uneven, some burnt, dark, and cracked, others pale and undercooked. The crumb inside is dense, heavy, tough, speckled with gritty fillers, barely risen, spar from the light, fluffy bread of better times. But it's bread, nonetheless. It's food, and for now, that is enough. You slice a small piece and offer it to your family. Their smiles are faint, but real, a small victory against the omnipresent hunger. You take a bite yourself, chewing slowly, letting the rough texture fill your mouth. It tastes bitter, dusty, and tough, but somehow it tastes like survival. You think about the bakers who came before you, those who kept their ovens burning through plagues and famines. God, their loaves must have been just as stubborn, their flour just as coarse, their ovens just as unpredictable. You are part of that long, unbroken line of persistence and survival. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters and carrying the smell of damp earth and burning wood. You pause for a moment, looking out over the bleak, gray fields, the twisted trees, and the muddy village paths. The famine has changed everything, but you are still here, still baking, still fighting, and somehow that counts for something. You wake before the sun, though it hardly makes a difference. Dawn in these months is more suggestion than certainty, just a slow shift from black to a sort of murky pewter, like the sky has forgotten how to shine. You lie there for a moment, staring at the ceiling beams overhead, half wondering if they'll finally give in to rot and collapse on you. Wouldn't that be convenient? One less day to knead bark into dough. But the thought drifts away like smoke, because deep down, you already know the truth. You'll get up, you'll bake, and you'll hope today's batch doesn't kill anyone. You sit up, palms creaking like old floorboards, and rub your hands together for warmth. They're cracked and roared in some places, pale in others. The flour does that to you over time, especially the kind you've been using lately. Not real flour, not the good stuff. It's half sawdust, half desperation. You eye the bucket in the corner, the one where you're fermenting your latest starter. It bubbles sluggishly, a sullen thing, like it resents being alive. It's honestly, same. Pulling on your rough wool tunic and your apron, you make your way to the bakery's main room. The air is heavy with ash and damp stone. The hearth has gone cold overnight, and your breath puffs like a ghost in the dim light. You crouch down, strike flint to steel, and coax a reluctant flame to life. The warmth creeps outward, slow and stingy, but you'll take what you can get. The loaves you baked yesterday are stacked on a wooden shelf. They're not pretty. You already knew they wouldn't be. Crusts are uneven, some cracked, others soft and sagging like old shoes. Still, the villagers will line up for them. Hunger makes people forget what bread is supposed to taste like. You wonder if they remember, or if their memories have adapted to the new normal. The crunch of grit between their teeth, the bite of bitterness from acorn meal, the way your bread sticks to the roof of the mouth like clay. You carry the loaves outside in a large basket. It's covered in a damp cloth to keep off the dust. The village is already stirring, though stirring is generous, more like dragging itself out of sleep, the way an old mule resists leaving the barn. People huddle in their cloaks and patched shawls, eyes sunken, cheeks hollow. A child waves at you, too tired to smile properly. You wave back and set up your usual spot near the well, beneath the crooked sign that once proudly read Baker. No, it's just BAE, the missing letters having long since surrendered to weather. In time, the villagers form a queue. No money changes hands. That ended weeks ago. Now it's trade. A scrap of cloth, a small onion, a rusted fishhook, anything remotely useful. You nod silently as each person steps forward and offers their token. An old woman gives you a handful of withered dandelion greens. You hand her a loaf. It's a fair deal. Probably. By the time the basket is empty, your hands are full of small, mismatched offerings. You tuck them into your pouch with a practiced motion, already thinking about the next batch. But as you turn to leave, a man approaches tall, cloaked, wearing the thin kind of smile that makes your stomach tighten. He holds out a coin, a silver one, that alone would be suspicious. But then he says the words you've come to dread. I'll need 20 loaves by sunrise tomorrow for the manor. The manor. You force a nod. Yes, my lord. He's not really a lord, just an assistant to one. But titles are flimsy in times like this. Anyone who has a bit of coin and a full belly might as well be king. You know, refusing him isn't an option. Refusing might mean losing your flour, your hearth, your bakery, or worse. So you accept the order and walk back home with a weight heavier than bread dough in your gut. Back in the bakery, you stare at your dwindling supplies. Flour, low, bark, plentiful. Unfortunately, acorns, soaked and bitter. You do a quick count in your head. It might work if you cut the dough with even more filler. If you work through the night, the oven holds. You start at once, grinding bark with a stone pestle until it's fine enough to sift into the mix. You scrape every last bit of flour from the bin, even the dusty remains clinging to the corners. You pour in water slowly, stirring, then kneading until the dough forms. It's even tougher than yesterday. You push against it like you're wrestling a sack of wet gravel, your arms burning with the effort. The hours blur. Your mind wanders. You think about other bakers in other places. Akkad. You once heard a tale about a baker in France who used mashed beans to fake flour during a bad harvest. The town accused him of witchcraft when the bread didn't rise. They said the loaves were cursed, sucked the life from whoever ate them. You're not sure if that's true or just tavern gossip, but it makes you glance at your own dough with mild suspicion. Historians still argue whether famine bread ever caused mass illness, or if that was just medieval paranoia. Some loaves included ergotrine, infected with fungus that made people hallucinate and writhe in the streets. Do you remember hearing about entire villages thought to be cursed, when, in fact, they were just unknowingly tripping? You eye your flour pile and wonder, how lucky do you feel today? The loaves rise, slowly, sluggish, uneven. You shape them quickly. 12, 15, 18. Just barely enough. You pray the oven will behave. It doesn't. The fire dies halfway through the bake, and you scramble to feed it scraps of kindling, even splinters from your own furniture. The crusts burn on some, remain doughy on others. It's chaos. It's exhausting. It's typical. But somehow, by dawn, you have 20 loaves. They're not great. They're barely edible, but they're done. When the cloaked man returns, he eyes the bread with thin-lipped judgment, but he says nothing. He leaves a second silver coin on the counter and disappears, his boots clacking against the icy stones outside. You don't bother watching him go. You just sit there, letting the warmth of the oven wash over you, and try not to think about tomorrow, because tomorrow, it begins again. You sit by the oven long after the loaves are gone, listening to the fire crackle and pop like it's trying to talk you out of your next bad idea. Your hands rest on your knees, fingers coated in a dusting of flour and ash, and you catch yourself tracing small circles on your apron like you're drawing spells in the air. Maybe you are. Maybe some part of you is hoping that if you move your fingers just right, you'll summon a miracle like actual wheat, or butter, or, dare you dream it, cheese. Outside, the day creeps forward. You hear the muffled sounds of life filtering in through the cracks of your shuttered windows. A child crying, the distant call of someone hawking turnips with more enthusiasm than their turnips deserve, the clatter of hooves on frozen dirt. You don't move. The warmth of the oven is the closest thing you've had to comfort in days. And even though the wood smoke stings your eyes, you'd rather be here than anywhere else. Eventually, the smoke starts to thicken just a little. A subtle reminder that comfort, like everything else these days, has an expiration date. You stand, stretch, and turn back to your work table. The flour sack you were hoping to ignore still sits there, depressingly light. You know you should ration it, stretch it, pretend you can make it last longer than it will. But you also know what's coming. Word has reached your village of a grain inspection. You sigh. Hi. That's the phrase they use when the lords, men, come stomping through town to confiscate whatever edible grain remains, leaving behind a generous nothing in return. Supposedly, it's to redistribute resources more fairly. What it really means is, give up your food now, or give up your freedom later. You consider hiding what little flour you have, maybe behind the loose stone in the hearth, maybe beneath the floorboards. But they've searched there before. They know all the tricks. One baker in the next village over tried hiding sacks in the church crypt. Clever, right? Till the priest gave them up in exchange for a larger share of the redistribution. You've never trusted someone who smiles that wide while holding a communion wafer. So instead, you do something bold or foolish. You begin baking. Yes, it's a risk. But in your strange baker's logic, you figure they're less likely to seize finished bread than raw grain. Bread is perishable. Grain is potential. Flour can become anything: bread, porridge, paste, even beer. But once it's baked, it's just bread. And old bread at that. not worth much to a greedy steward. You start the process, again mix, knead, shape, bake. But this time, you do something different. Something small. You add herbs. The dry, brittle things you've hoarded in a jar above the fireplace. Thyme, a little rosemary. Nothing fancy, just enough to change the smell. As the loaves bake, the scent that fills the bakery isn't just ash and sour bark. It's something almost warm, almost familiar. You'd forgotten what joy smelled like. Apparently, it smells like bread with herbs. As the loaves cool, you sit and stare at them and look, ... better. Not by much, but enough to make your chest ache a little. Not from hunger, for once, but from memory. You remember your mother making loaves like this on feast days. The house full of laughter, of clinking cups and clumsy singing. The smell of herbs in the air, and butter melting down the sides of thick slices, still warm from the oven. You blink hard and look away. That was another life, another century. There's a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, an official one. You take a breath, dust your hands, and open it. Two of the steward's men stand there, wrapped in furs too fine for the weather. One of them is eating something, an apple, of all things. It shines in the sunlight like something from a fairy tale. You haven't seen an apple in months. He takes a slow bite while staring at you. Crunch. We're collecting, says the other one. No greeting, no eye contact. Just the same tired words that have preceded hundreds of seizures across the countryside. You nod. Of course. They push past you without waiting, stomping through your bakery like they own it. One kicks at your flour bin as if it might be hiding a secret door. The other opens your cupboards, inspects your shelves, even peers under the work table. You stand still, forcing your expression to stay neutral, your hands folded behind your back to hide the shaking. Finally, they find the loaves, still warm, still fragrant. The man with the apple lifts one and sniffs it. Herbs, he says, raising an eyebrow. Yes, you reply. It's from the back garden. I've been experimenting. People are more willing to trade for something with flavor. He takes a bite. You hold your breath. He chews, slowly, thoughtfully, then shrugs. Tastes like sawdust with a hint of regret. He mutters and tosses the rest back onto the table. You don't let yourself flinch as it lands with a dull thud. The other man grabs 3 loaves, cocks them under his arm, and says, "For the manor." You nod again. It's less than you feared. You'll take it. They leave without another word. You close the door behind them and lean your back against it. It's your heart pounding. Somehow, you got away with it. Barely, you sink to the floor, staring at the herb-flecked crust of the half-eaten loaf. You pick it up gently, brush off the flour, and take a bite from the untouched side. It's dry, it's dense, but it's something different. Something you made in a world that keeps trying to make you disappear. You wonder if there will ever be a time again when people bake for joy, not survival. When bread isn't currency, or compliance, or resistance, but just food, just comfort. Historians still argue whether the culinary creativity of famine bakers was a form of rebellion, or simply adaptation. But you know the truth. Every herb you add, every loaf you smuggle past greedy hands, every meal you stretch from crumbs, it's all rebellion. Quiet, flour-dusted, oven-warmed rebellion. You sit there for a while longer, chewing slowly, letting the scent of thyme linger in your nose and the taste of bark fade from your tongue. Then you stand, brush the crumbs from your lap, and get back to work, because tomorrow is coming. And with it, hunger. You wake in the middle of the night to the sound of scratching. Not rats, though you wouldn't be surprised if it were. No, this is something softer, more hesitant. A fingernail against wood. You sit up in your cot, blink into the darkness, and listen. There it is, again, scritch, scritch. Your heart begins to thud, slow and wary. In this village, no sound at night is ever good news. You light a stub of candle, the flame dancing in the gloom, and move toward the door. You hesitate, one hand hovering near the latch. Then you hear it whispered, desperate. Please, just a crust. You crack the door open. A girl stands there, barely more than a shadow. She's thin in that way that frightens you, not just hungry, but hollowed out, like the hunger has become part of her bones. Her clothes hang like old curtains. Okay. She cradles something in her arms, a bundle of rags wrapped around what might be another child. Her eyes find yours, wide and dark. You glance behind her. No movement, no lurking soldiers, no trap. You step aside and let her in. She moves like a ghost, silent, barefoot. You close the door behind her and offer her a stool near the hearth, where the embers are still giving off a faint heat. She says nothing, just unwraps the bundle to reveal a toddler, asleep or unconsciously. It's hard to tell. You say nothing. Either there's no need. Her presence alone speaks louder than words. You fetch her at the end of a loaf last night's, the one with the herb crust. Tear. It's hard and stale, but her fingers tremble as she takes it. She doesn't eat it right away. She breaks off a small piece and presses it into the child's mouth first. The toddler stirs weakly, chews. Only then does the girl allow herself a bite. The candle flickers. You sit back, watching her in the quiet. And you'd think not for the first time how strange it is that, kin all your years of baking, you never really thought of bread as life. Bread was work, sweat, fire, sales. Now it's triage. It's sacrifice and salvation in the same cracked crust. Historians still debate how common informal food sharing was during medieval famines. Some records hint at communal ovens and neighborly generosity. Others describe hoarding, betrayal, and theft. But reality, as you know, is rarely so clean. Sometimes it's both. You bake to sell, but you give too, when you can, when the risk isn't too high. When a ghost of a girl knocks in the night and reminds you what matters, the girl says thank you with her eyes, not her voice. And then, slowly, she stands. The child stirs in her arms, wraps a tiny hand around a shred of cloth. You walk her to the door and press a second crust into her free hand. Your own breakfast, you suppose? She nods once, then she's gone, swallowed by the darkness. You don't sleep again that night. Morning comes gray and sullen. You prepare the dough with tired fingers, your thoughts still drifting to that girl. You wonder where she'll go. She'll make it through the week. If she'll come back, you'll have anything left to give, as you need. The door creaks again, this time without knocking. A boy enters, no older than 10, hair sticking up in odd directions, his face smeared with soot. He walks straight to the table and slaps down 2 eggs, real ones, still warm. In trade, he says. You blink. Where did you get these? Hen house, at the monastery, he says, a little too proudly. They didn't see me. You raise an eyebrow. So, not really yours to trade then. He shrugs. They don't need all of them. Besides, Father Stephen says, sharing is holy. You almost laugh. Almost. But you take the eggs, and you give him a half loaf, the freshest one you've got. He grins, already chewing before he reaches the door. It's like that sometimes, thievery masquerading as generosity. Or maybe the other way around. You've stopped trying to sort the difference. Morality's slippery when everyone's starving. You just do what you can. Today's batch is better. Slightly. The dough rose more evenly. The crusts browned instead of burning, and none of them collapsed in the middle. You credit the eggs a little in the fact that the fire burned hotter, thanks to the splintered stool you finally sacrificed as kindling. One fewer seat, but warmer hands. As the loaves cool, you hear footsteps outside. Not the cautious tread of a desperate child, or the huff of a tax collector. This is the clip-clop of hooves, okay, and bells. You peek out the shutter. A wagon, 2 horses, painted sides, worn but colorful. Travelers. This is rare. You open your door cautiously as the wagon pulls up. A man climbs down tall, bearded, wrapped in a patchwork cloak. Beside him, a woman with ink stains on her fingers and a satchel full of papers, scribblers, performers, maybe, traders at the very least. The man smiles. We heard rumor of bread in this town. You nod. You heard correctly. We can pay, he says, holding up a small pouch that jingles with more promise than weight. You gesture toward your loaves. Choose what you like. They take 4, not greedily, respectfully. The woman opens one and smells it, then closes her eyes. Time, she says. That takes me back. They sit on your bench and eat quietly. Afterward, the man offers a trade, a story in exchange for a 5th loaf. You hesitate, but only for a second. Dill. He stands, clears his throat, and begins to speak. A tale of a baker not unlike you who once saved a village with a single loaf laced with honey and powdered rose petals. A prince disguised as a pauper, a curse broken, a wedding feast that lasted a week. It's all nonsense, of course, but it's warm nonsense, sweet nonsense. And for 10 full minutes, you forget your hunger. The splinters is your empty flour bin. When he finishes, you hand over the extra loaf, and he bows with theatrical flair. The wagon creaks away soon after, vanishing into the road like a dream you can't quite remember. You sit on your stoop, elbows on knees, and exhale slowly. There's still bark to grind, water to boil, ash to sweep. But in this moment, just for now, you feel human again. Later that day, as the sun dips toward the hills and paints the rooftops in dusty gold, you step out behind the bakery to relieve your back. The yard is nothing more than a patch of packed earth with a few broken crates and a bent rain barrel, but the sky above it feels enormous. You stretch, you breathe, you listen. You hear chickens fussing down the lane, the faint tink of hammer on horseshoe from the smithy, and, most persistently, your own stomach grumbling. You ignore it. Hunger is background noise now. You lean against the wall and close your eyes. It's there, in this rare quiet, that you start to notice the creeping smell of smoke. Not your ovens, smoke something sharper, more bitter. You snap to attention. Fire. You whirl around and see it, thin black streaks against the sky, drifting from the direction of the Granary. No. You drop your rag and sprint. The road is already alive with shouting, figures running, buckets sloshing, someone ringing a cracked bell with frantic energy. You round the corner and see it. The granary's thatched roof is ablaze, flames licking greedily at the sky. The crowd is already forming, a bucket line, poorly coordinated, but desperate. You join them without thinking, your hands slick with water, soot, and panic. Someone screams, it's sabotage. Someone else shouts, it's the beggar kids. Then a third voice, it's the miller. He wants the grain price up. Historians still argue whether such fires were accidents or schemes. Some accounts describe carelessness, untended candle, a lightning strike. Others suggest political motives, revenge, or even market manipulation. Today, though, you don't care. You just want it out. The flames devour fast. It's the dry wood, the summer drought, and the wind always, the wind. Buckets crash to the ground. Someone gets too close and stumbles back, coughing and blind. You catch a glimpse of Father Emmerich, robes soaked, shouting prayers no one's listening to. The granary collapses. Not all of it, just the west side, but it's enough. You hear the grain inside hissing as it burns, dry kernels snapping like tiny bones. The smell is terrible, smoky and sweet, like burnt porridge and scorched parchment. Eventually, it's over. The crowd stands in stunned silence, faces streaked with ash, water in disbelief. A woman sobs openly. Poorly, Tin curses under his breath with a fury that's too old for him. You look at the wreckage and know what it means. Less flour, more hunger, and an entire village is trying to pretend that everything's fine when it very obviously isn't. You head home. That night, no one knocks at your door. It feels unnatural. You half expect the girl from before, the one with the bundle of rags and eyes like midnight, but she doesn't come. Maybe she heard about the fire. Maybe she ran. Or maybe, worst of all, she didn't make it to the morning. You try not to dwell on that. Instead, you sit by your oven, where the heat has faded to a dull, tired glow. You slice a piece of your own bread and arrow, Try slice hand. Eat it slowly, as if to stretch the experience out. Chew and chew. Not because it's delicious, but because chewing means you haven't yet swallowed the last bite. You remember the traveler's story, the prince, the honey, the rose petals, and wonder if it was meant to comfort you or mock you. In the days that follow, things get tighter. Flour is now rationed. The miller, tight-lipped and jumpy, posts new rates on a torn sheet of parchment nailed to his door. 3 times the price. No credit. You try to argue. You plead. You even threaten, quietly, but his hands tremble as he talks, and you realize he's afraid. Maybe not of you, maybe of something bigger. The manna lord, the reeve, or simply of what happens next if he runs out. So you ration too. Fewer loaves per day, smaller portions, more bark flour, more bran, more stretch. You try to hide it with salt and herbs, but you know the texture's wrong. Your regulars notice. Some stop coming. Some pay anyway, out of habit or hope. A few ask for credit, eyes downcast. You give it once, maybe twice, but soon you can't. The guilt is heavy, not just morally, literally. You feel it in your chest, in your spine, in the way your shoulders hunch lower each day. You become acquainted with silence. Long, aching silences in the shop. Silences when you cut dough in half instead of thirds. Silences when someone looks at your shelf and walks away empty-handed. You also become acquainted with the barter crowd. Okay, they arrive early now, before dawn. One with a chicken feather, another with 3 rusty nails. One man offers a rabbit pelt, though it's still damp and smells suspiciously like it was peeled just hours ago. You don't want any of it, but you take what you can, because they're hungry, and so are you. The worst part is the dreams. They come nightly now. In them, you're baking, always baking, but the dough never rises, or it crumbles, or worse, it speaks, too. One night, it whispers, your name, another. It opens its crusty mouth and begs you to stop kneading. You wake sweating, gasping, and always hungry. Then, one gray morning, just as you're setting the day's first loaf into the embers, the door opens. It's the reeve. He doesn't speak right away, just watches as the heat curls the edge of the crust. Then, the manner. Lord has guests. He'll need 12 loaves by tomorrow. Fine quality. You stare at him. 12. You repeat? That's my entire stock. He shrugs. Then start early. No flour, you say. His lip curls. Find some. You want to throw a peel at his smug, clean-shaven face. Instead, you say nothing. He leaves a coin on the table. Just one. Thin, scratched, and just like that, you're baking for the people who need it least, while your neighbors chew on acorns and curses. You burn the first loaf, out of spite. Maybe you scrape it out of the oven and eat it yourself. It's awful, but it fills your belly for the first time in days. Later, you grind some cattail roots for flour. Mix in what little you have left from the mill. You shape 12 loaves, smaller than usual, but beautiful, golden, soft. The kind of bread that gets served with butter and meat and wine. The kind of bread that gets wasted. You hate every one of them. You deliver the loaves in the evening. The manor cook gives you a glance and a grunt. You don't ask questions. You don't wait for praise. You just leave. When you get home, you find the ash bucket tipped over. Someone's been inside. Your last crust is gone. You sigh, strop onto your stool, and chuckle to yourself. At least someone needed it. The next morning, there's a strange kind of stillness. It's not peaceful, just quiet in that ominous way, like the sky is holding its breath. You open your eyes before the rooster crows, already sensing something isn't right. Maybe it's the way your bones ache differently, or how the air seems thicker as you light the oven. No one knocks, not even old Marta, who usually shuffles by before sunrise for her heel of crust and 5 minutes of grumbling. The door stays shut. The street outside, silent. You wait. Eventually, a distant bell rings. Not the church bell, the town bell. Sharp, urgent, wrong. You step outside, wiping your hands on your apron. There's movement at the square. Not the usual trickle of groggy peasants on their way to market, but a huddle, dense, murmuring, swaying. You move toward it, as if drawn, and then you hear the word, plague. You freeze. It drops into your gut like a stone into still water. No splash, no fuss, just wait. You look at the faces around you, pale, panicked, pinched. You see someone cross themselves. Someone else mutters a prayer you don't recognize. The baker next to you, Tomas, the one who always burns his bottoms, he's trembling. You want to say something to him, something reassuring, something like maybe it's just a fever, or it's probably the bad fish again, but you don't, because you know. Bread sales plummet overnight, not because people aren't hungry, but because they're terrified to touch anything touched by someone else. Your loaves sit out all day, crumbling stale in silence. Someone whispers that the flour might be infected with the devil's breath. Another insists the fire in the oven drives out the sickness, but won't eat anything without blessing. At first, a third bless him asks if he can boil the bread. You sell him some. He thanks you. You never see him again. The officials arrive by horseback. They wear gloves, veils, and the faint stench of vinegar. One of them nails a parchment to the church door. Quarantine protocols. It's written in Latin, but someone translates. All suspected homes will be sealed. No one leaves without permission. No funerals, no markets, no festivals. Historians still argue whether these measures helped slow the spread or simply trapped people together, making things worse. Some say early quarantines saved entire regions. Others believe they were just performative panics, symbolic, not strategic. Either way, the result is the same. Fear spreads faster than illness. Soon, the baker's lane is marked with a crude symbol, chalked by children, supposedly to ward off evil. It's just a circle with an X through it, but it feels like a target. People stop coming to your door altogether. You still baked. Why? Who knows? Habit, maybe, or hope, or defiance, or just because the fire in the oven is warmer than the chill in your chest. You start giving the bread away, leaving it on stoops, placing it near windows. You don't knock. You don't want to scare them, but sometimes, if you wait around the corner, you hear the soft squeak of a hinge, a gasp, a whispered thanks. One day, you leave a half loaf for the midwife. She's old, sharp, and frightening, but kind in her own way. She once stitched your hand after a nasty peel burn. The next morning, a bundle of dried thyme appears on your doorstep. You take it as a blessing. On another day, you see the town priest carrying a sack over his shoulder. You call out to him, joking, maybe, trying to lighten the moment, delivering salvation. He looks at you grimly. No, he says, bodies. You don't laugh. Soon after, someone boards up the apothecary's shop. A small cross is painted on the door in red. Rumors swirl. A family of 9 wiped out in a single night. A baby born with black spots. A goat that keels over, bleeding from the eyes. None of it makes sense, but it doesn't need to dot your stomach. Knots constantly, but not from hunger. This is different. This is dread. You start cleaning obsessively, washing your hands with ash, boiling rags, scrubbing the peel, the oven door, even your flour sacks. It makes no difference, of course, but you need the illusion of control. We all do. One night, it's a knock. It nearly stops your heart. You move slowly, quietly. Another knock. You open the door. It's the girl, the rag bundle girl. It's the one who asked you for bread weeks ago. Only now, she's thinner, paler, her lips cracked, tweeted her eyes. Still midnight. She doesn't speak, just holds out an empty bowl. You take it, fill it, return it. She eats in silence, crouched near the hearth. After a time, she speaks. Mama's gone. You nod. There's nothing else to say. She looks at the bread, and then up at you. Is it true there? Burning the sick. You hesitate. Not yet. She chews slowly. They will. You say nothing. After that, she visits every evening. Says very little. Just eats. Sometimes leaves with the second loaf tucked into her cloak. You never ask where she goes. It's easier not to know. One morning, There's a pounding on the bakery door. Not a knock, not a plea, a demand. You answer. It's the Reeve against wetting eyes, wild, holding a kerchief to his mouth. You're to report to the South Quarter, he says. They're short on food. You'll deliver 10 loaves daily. You blink. There's no flour. Figure it out. Then pay me. He scowls. Your payment is protection. You want to laugh, but you don't. Not in his face. Instead, you go back inside and curse into your apron. You scrounge. Bark flour, cracked lentils, a handful of millet that you forgot in a sack. You make it work, barely. You deliver the bread, nose covered, eyes low. The South Quarter is worse than you imagined. Piles of ash in the street, laundry frozen on the line. No bird song, no children, just silence and the smell. The days stretch long, each one indistinguishable from the last. The fire burns. The oven smokes. You knead, you bake, you deliver, you wait. And then, one morning, a cart rolls down the lane, covered in a sheet. The driver wears black. You step back into your doorway and watch. He stops outside a home. It's 3 doors down. Hops off. Knocks once. No answer. He pushes the door open, carries something out, covers it, moves on. You close the door. You sit down, and you cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. It's the steady stream of tears into your apron. And then, because you must, you stand, wipe your face, and start the next batch. You're almost used to it now. The quiet, the ashes, the lingering scent of rosemary, smoke, and something darker, heavier. There's still flour beneath your nails, despite how little is left to bake. You scrape what you can from the bottom of the barrel. You barter for grain that smells like feet. You stretch loaves, thinner than ever, sneaking in dried carrots or wild nettles, just to give them some kind of bite. And yet people still come. The girl, especially. She comes in later now, after nightfall. Her cheeks are sunken. She barely speaks. You don't ask where she sleeps or what she sees, but sometimes she brings you news. The north gate's been sealed. The priest hasn't left his quarters. They're saying the rats brought it. Rats. That's a new one. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually understood the connection between rodents and plague. Some evidence suggests they noticed the pattern rats before fever, but had no idea about the fleas. Others think the rat theory is a later invention, retrofitted by modern logic. Either way, it doesn't matter to you. What matters is there are rats everywhere. One dies in your storeroom. You sweep it out with a shovel, nose covered, eyes squinting, as though sight alone might curse you. You bake less now. You're weak, dizzy, hands trembling by mid-morning. You ration your own bread more strictly than you do for others. The irony isn't lost on you. You, the baker, slowly, starving. A bad joke. Really? Still, you keep going. One night, the girl doesn't come. You wait by the hearth, loaves cooling behind you. She doesn't arrive the next, or the next. You don't ask. You just save a crust by the fire. Eventually, even the Reeve stops knocking. Then, the town bell tolls again. Not a warning this time. A release. You step outside and blink into the pale sun. A few others do the same. Faces you recognize. Some you don't. Eyes that seem older. Bodies thinner. But the silence is different now. Not fear, just exhaustion. You begin sweeping your doorstep. Someone watches you. They approach slowly, cautiously, like they might spook you if they move too fast. It's the cooper's wife, Kay. She smiles, faintly. Her hand trembles. I heard you still have yeast, she says. You nod. She lowers her voice, as if asking for contraband. Would you teach me? You blink. To bake. She nods. You glance behind her. 2 other women wait near the corner. One carries a child. Another clutches a bowl. You see more movement, like a slow, uncertain procession award. Your shop. You don't speak. You step aside. Let them in. You show them the barrels, the peel, the dough. Your hands tremble, but you keep moving. You remember your mother doing the same dot. It's all the way something as simple as bread becomes an anchor, a form of resilience. a ritual, a kind of prayer. That night, you sit alone by the oven. You close your eyes. The fire cracks gently, like whispering coals. You feel the warmth against your face, and for the first time in weeks you smile. Not because it's over, but because you're still here, still baking, still surviving. And that, somehow, feels enough. The fire is soft now, low and even, like a heartbeat. You sit there a while longer, leaning gently against the cool stone wall, the smell of fresh crust still clinging to your apron. The night is quiet, not with fear this time, but with stillness, peaceful, earned outside. The stars return, slow, patient, familiar, and you let your mind drift, finally, right? Not to grain shortages, or plague carts, or the next batch of stolen oats, but to a simpler place. A kitchen, maybe. A field of tall, golden wheat. A soft morning rain. The hard days haven't vanished. You know that? Famine leaves scars deeper than bone. Okay, but tonight, you feel the tiniest sliver of something unexpected. Hope, maybe. Tomorrow, you'll teach the girl if she comes back. Maybe. You'll build up the stock again. Maybe the market will reopen. The millers will return. And you'll even laugh again someday. For now, though, you exhale. Your body softens. The oven crackles, and the long shadows stretch gently across the floor, like an old blanket draped over the earth. Just breathe. You made it. The worst passed. You're not the same, but you're still here. And tomorrow, there will be bread. Turn off your thoughts now. Let them slow. Let them settle, like flour in the air. You're safe, you're warm, and you're ready to sleep. Good night.